and she stands right in front of this guy whilst he was minding his own business. Who is responsible for that guy then lusting in his mind? The temptation may come, but his response to the temptation is up to him. Welcome back to the Made to Be Men podcast, where we encourage men to walk with God and be who God has called them to be. My name's Chris, I'm your host, and this is the second part of a series I started on manhood. So the first video will already be out. If you haven't watched that, I recommend going back and watching that, as it laid the foundation for what manhood is. And I said manhood in essence was about responsibility. And so today I want to go a bit deeper on the first stage of responsibility, which was responsibility for yourself, to put away childish things and to become responsible and mature. So, responsibility for ourselves. What does that mean? I would break this down into three main categories. I'm sure there's other aspects to it, but there's three key ones I want to cover. The first and most important is responsibility for your spiritual life. That is the primary way you be responsible for yourself, is you have to take responsibility for your spiritual life. The second is responsibility for your thoughts. And this links in with your spiritual life, but I think it's particularly important to be able to control your thoughts and be responsible for them. So that's the second one. And the third is responsibility for your general well-being. So just to talk about, firstly, responsibility for your spiritual life. I mentioned last time how Jesus, at 12 years old, had a sense of spiritual responsibility for himself. He was going to the synagogue. He was pursuing God and pursuing his calling. We need to have that same desire to be spiritually the best men we can be and to pursue God. I've got another video on seeking God, which I recommend you watch, that ties in with this. But we can also look at Jesus just before he started his ministry. In Luke chapter 4 and verse 17, it says, Jesus was handed the scroll of Isaiah, and he found where it was written about him. He found where it was written about him. And this really is one of the keys to being responsible for your spiritual life, is you need to know what is written about you in the word. And you can read about people like John the Baptist. When he was asked, "Who are you?" he said, "I'm the voice in the desert shouting, 'Prepare the way of the Lord.'" He knew where it was written about him. And back in those times, they didn't have, chapter and verse. They didn't have headings and subheadings in their Bible, so you could easily find and find verses with particular references. They didn't have blue letter Bible where you could search a particular word and find what it says about a particular topic. He had to read through the scriptures, old school, just read through page after page, and he had to find where it was written about him. And through the help of the Spirit, it became alive to him and it became real. That's where he got his identity. See, that's responsibility for your spiritual life. Taking the time to read the word, to find what it says concerning you. That's responsibility. And then going back to Jesus as our example. Every time he was tempted or challenged, he responded with a scripture. When he was tempted, he said, "It is written." Even when he was crucified, when he was dying on the cross, he spoke a scripture. He spoke, my God, why have you forsaken me?" We need to become the type of men spiritually to where when we're tempted, when we're challenged, when we're suffering, we can respond with the word. The word is what comes out of us when we're pressured. But we can only reach that point through responsibility for our spiritual lives. So the first question is, do we spend time in the word? Do we spend time in prayer to find out what God has for us? To find out where it's written concerning us? To know what our purpose is? It takes responsibility to do that. So the second aspect of responsibility for ourselves that I want to talk about is responsibility for our thoughts, controlling our thoughts and taking responsibility for them. The Bible talks multiple times about how we need to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, how we need to think on things that are pure and holy and good. And so if it gives us those instructions, that means we're capable of doing it. We're responsible for our thoughts. We can control what we think. In fact, there's a verse in the Bible, and it's Titus 2 verse 6, that is addressed specifically to young men. It's one of the few verses that addresses young men specifically. And it says, urge the young men to be sober-minded. Some versions say self-controlled. But sober-minded, the word means controlled in your thinking. You have self-control in your thought life. What you think is under your control. Your thoughts are not just running wild. You're not just allowing yourself to lust because you've seen certain things. You don't just allow your anger to grow in your thinking because someone has done something that you didn't like to you. You're controlled in your thinking. Here's a question to think about. If a man was minding his business in a public place, whether it's the gym or whether it's the beach, but he's in a public place, and a woman comes and stands right in front of him wearing minimal clothing. So she's dressed immodestly, and she stands right in front of this guy whilst he was minding his own business. Who is responsible for that guy then lusting in his mind? Some people might say both, but I say the responsibility lies with the man, because he's responsible for his own thought life. The temptation may come, but his response to the temptation is up to him. You can control your own thoughts. You can make decisions that help protect your mind. Yeah, women should dress modestly. There's a responsibility for bringing the temptation. However, the response to the temptation lies with us men. We can control our thinking. So we have to choose to align our thoughts with God's thoughts, to think the way the scripture wants us to think. Part of that also means thinking about others more than ourselves. I mentioned putting away childish things. A child only thinks about themselves. Putting away childish thoughts means you're no longer only thinking about what you feel and what you want. You're aware of the thoughts. You're aware of other people's needs and concerns. So taking responsibility for our thought life is key. And then the third one is responsibility for our general well-being. Now this one, I do think it's still important that we take care of ourselves. Basic hygiene, first of all, it should go without saying, but there's a lot of guys who don't shower regularly, don't use deodorant, don't, make sure their hygiene is good. And this is part of just being responsible for yourself. Make sure you're clean. Make sure you smell good when you go out. Make sure you dress well. Be well groomed. Take care of your appearance. How we look is how we present ourselves to the world. And there is also an aspect of this that goes back to thinking about other people rather than just yourselves. Because yes, God looks at our heart, and God doesn't judge us based on how we dress as such, but other people can receive or not receive from you based on how you're dressed or how you look. That's just the way other people view us. So with that in mind, we might be considerate of how other people would receive from us or not. If someone is more likely to hear the gospel from me and listen to what I have to say because I'm dressed smarter rather than just casually in a tracksuit, then I might try and dress sharper to try and help them receive what I have to say. Now, I'm not saying we just live based on the opinions of other people. However, if God leads us to dress a particular way to help others receive, we should follow that. But as men who are representing God, we should be dressed as such. We should be tidy. We should be clean. We should look good. And then part of being responsible for our general well-being is finances. Our finances should be in order. I know starting off, you can go through periods where maybe you're not earning as much as you need, you're not able to pay for things. You could go through periods like that, but being financially responsible is also part of our general well-being. Are we tithing? Are we giving? Are we budgeting and saving? Are we stewarding our money well, or are we wasteful with it? Are we faithful with what God has given us? See, all of this is part of being responsible. And so being responsible for your spiritual life should be a priority. Being responsible for your thoughts, taking your thoughts captive, and then being responsible for our general well-being. So this is part 2 of our series on manhood. If this is helpful, share in the comments, like and subscribe, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.